In my video named "I wish I knew this as a cybersecurity student", I was asked how to handle polymathy in cybersecurity. I have touched on this point on multiple videos, but I have never addressed it entirely. It is time to do just that. In my video name Avoiding the Experts Trap, I analyze a crazy job specification, and I explain why the current job landscape is not good for experts. I also discuss how we arrived at this point. Complexity is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the more layers of abstraction and complexity you build, for instance old-school data centers replaced with cloud providers and APIs, the easier it becomes to work with tech, and the less likely you are to spend time fixing low-level issues. On the other hand, the more layers you add, the more disconnected you become from the fundamentals. And once you run into errors, you will struggle to understand why. You may think that by learning Terraform and taking an AWS course, you are set and ready to become a cloud security professional. However, if you missed the networking and programming classes, you are now playing catch-up. Ironically enough, the increased complexity of tech has pushed professionals towards becoming experts in specific tech. Consider Azure architects, Splunk engineers, etc. I personally consider myself a jack of all trades with a strong inclination towards blue team. And if you are wondering what blue team means, check out my video on this topic. However, I believe that now the market demands hybrids between experts and jacks of all trades. And if you are wondering what I mean by expert, check out my video on Avoiding the Experts Trap. This means that if you want to pursue cloud security as an example, you'd better know how to harden an infrastructure, but also understand what a breach looks like. If you are an incident responder, you need to understand the tactics and techniques employed by attackers. Now that you understand the problem, let's look at why you should become a hybrid cybersecurity professional. When you choose the hybrid professional path, you have to be ready for the long hours, the stress, and the endless reading and practicing. That's life, but there are good reasons for you to aim for this ideal. The first reason is that you are rare, and by being rare you become a sort of expert, this time without quotes, in the sense that companies want you to work for them. They are also more willing to accept your terms. The second reason is that you are recession-proof, and while no one is entirely safe from layoffs, the more specialized you are, the less likely you are to survive. And wait, I know what you are thinking. But Bruno, if I'm so specialized and dependable, how can the company fire me? It's crazy. Well, you are almost right when you say that by being specialized, you are less likely to be fired. But that depends on how important you are. If you are specialized and highly valuable for the company, then you'll be fine. However, if you are simply specialized and not really relevant for the company, and perhaps even a bit too expensive, they will not really think twice before they let you go. After all, the company could have just needed your specialized knowledge for a cutting-edge research project that never really became profitable. The third reason is that excluding the average tech bro, the majority, you are competing with experts, the Golang developers, the Linux sysadmins. These people are not progress-proof and will be left behind by AI and other advancements. And as Seneca said, for fate, the willing leads, and the unwilling drags along. The last reason is that you are boredom-proof. If one day you decide that you don't want to work with AWS anymore, you can always pivot to Azure. And if you are tired of Python, as you should be, you can always switch to Golang. Now let's put this hybrid professional in the context of large companies and startups. While I advocate being as versatile as possible, there is a limit. And some people just want to focus on something specific. And that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. It is always about your audience, and this is where large companies versus startups come into play. Large companies have more red tape and more specialized roles. They can afford it. In these companies, you will find plenty of boring and repetitive jobs, especially if you are not allowed to work with other teams and shadow them. Startups, on the other hand, may be on a tighter budget and expect a good bang for their buck. The more versatile you are, the better, because you can always help other teams and support projects outside of your role. Here I'm talking about full-time jobs. But what about consulting and freelancing? Companies bring in consultants and freelancers when they need a combination of low commitment, meaning no benefits and long-term contracts, and high expertise. This applies to both large companies and startups. So if you are a consultant or a freelancer on a specific topic, you may end up focusing on just that, regardless of the company. Consultants and freelancers can also be hired to take excess workload, allowing companies to have elastic capacity. I have a video dedicated to helping you decide which cybersecurity field is the right one for you, with lots of tips that are quite relevant to today's topic. Becoming skilled starts with two major choices. The first one is deciding what to learn and choosing a path. And the second one is, not surprisingly, learning. The video that I just mentioned addresses primarily the first one, but doesn't really cover the second. This is where managing complexity becomes relevant. I also have another video on preparing for technical interviews, where I break down the high-level categories of knowledge within cybersecurity, and even tech in general. And these categories are concepts and ideas, frameworks, standards and procedures, tools, and areas or fields. In that same video, I explain in which order you should learn these categories. Now, the question you might have is, Bruno, how deep should I go? And how do I focus on the important topics while cutting down on the fluff? The answer to this is a two-step approach. The first one is achieving basic experience, theory and practice with the stuff that is part of the core area that you have chosen. Remember, you are a CyberSpartan. You are the hybrid between the expert and the jack of all trades. Once you choose your core area, for instance, cloud security or pen testing, your focus should be on learning the stuff that supports that expertise. For instance, if you want to become a cloud security specialist, and going back to the 4 categories of knowledge that I just mentioned, you should focus on IAM, virtualization, cloud architecture, and infrastructure as code for concepts and ideas, AWS, well-architected framework and SIS benchmarks for frameworks, standards, and procedures, Terraform, AWS CLI and APIs for tools, and finally the areas or fields are cloud security itself. Once more, you need to decide the path that you want to pursue, which is a combination of what you like and what the market needs. Ideally, these two should overlap, but they don't always do. Keep in mind that the market is a moving target and trends change. You need to review many job specifications to figure out what to focus on once you have chosen your direction. The second step is deciding how far you want to go. Knowledge depth depends on market expectations, your job, and the amount of commitment you are willing to put. Also, some people are okay with knowing just enough, while others want to learn as much as possible. The jacks of all trades I've talked about. As I always say, there are no good or bad decisions. Only decisions and their consequences. Someone willing to learn as much as possible will be better at troubleshooting issues, coming up with new ideas, implementing them, and progressing faster up the ladder. Especially at the beginning, without guidance, this person may waste a lot of time learning things that may not be relevant and will be forgotten later. This is a proactive professional, a true CyberSpartan. On the other hand, a person willing to learn just enough will be able to get a job done and save time for other pursuits, such as relaxing or working on side projects. This is a reactive type of professional that learns on the go, but may risk falling behind in the long term. And up until now, I've been quite high level and abstract, as I always am. In the last part of this video, I'm going to share with you 10 practical tips that I have learned over the years. The first one is that you should learn fundamentals by heart, because once you understand them, you'll be able to understand and learn anything. And if you are wondering what I consider fundamentals, check out my older mini-series where I teach you how to choose a cybersecurity degree or course. The second tip that I have for you is that you don't need to know most frameworks and guidelines off the top of your head. You can always check the PDFs or ask ChatGPT. A lot of frameworks are already implemented by tools and make intuitive sense. For example, NIST 800-61 has around 80 pages. But you can get a good understanding of what it is and the purpose by looking at section titles and diagrams. Also, once you have participated in your first incident response engagement, it becomes second nature. The third tip is that tools have documentation and help menus. You don't need to memorize every flag, input, and output. For a one-off problem, you can always use ChatGPT or Google to find the solution. If it's a recurring problem, you will come up with your own solution, maybe even a script, so that you don't have to remember complex commands in the future. The fourth tip is memorize fundamentals and look up abstractions. Syntaxes, REST API arguments, regular expressions, and configuration files. These can all be looked up online. No one expects you to work without the internet. If you know you need a list in Python, and the list is part of fundamentals, Just look up the syntax and reuse the code. There is no shame in that. Your brain should store critical information, not be a parrot. The fifth tip, if you don't understand a topic at all, buy a book. However, if you are a beginner or an intermediate, use Google or your favorite AI tool. The thing with books is that they get outdated quite quickly. However, they are really good for fundamentals because fundamentals don't tend to change. Tip number 6 is don't miss the forest for the trees. If you are studying cloud security, you will come across terms such as virtualization, IAM, APIs, and more. Then while you are researching these terms, you are going to come across other terms such as hypervisors, CPU enclaves, IAM auditing, REST, HTTP, and at some point you are going to find yourself reading Intel's manual, trying to memorize opcodes and features. And that's what I did when I was trying to learn reverse engineering. It was a really bad idea. You have 300 browser tabs open and you forgot how it all started. Knowing how deep and how wide to go comes with experience. But my rule of thumb is this. If a subtopic is related to a task I need to finish, I read about it. If it is not, I save the link or the concept/idea on my notes so I can take a look at it later. When you revisit that topic later, you will most likely realize that you understand it much better because of other things you have learned in the meantime. It may also happen that that topic was totally irrelevant, so you didn't waste any time with it. Tip number 7 is memorize things that may disqualify you. Trivia matters in tech and cybersecurity. The last thing you want is to freeze when someone asks you what is the port for HTTP. Actually, I'll tell you a joke about UDP, but you probably wouldn't get it. And if you don't get this joke, it is time for you to polish your trivia. Examples of trivia include protocols, ports, HTTP status codes, etc. These are things you can always look up, but some people might expect you to know them off the top of your head. Tip number 8 is that some things are meant to be practiced. I remember trying to study math in high school by reading math books. It should come as no surprise that I was terrible at mathematics until I changed my approach and started practicing instead of reading. And tech, of all the arts, is no different. Everything, even a 200-page PDF from NIST, has some practical implications. Certain things like programming, APIs, tools, blue and red teaming, etc. need to be practiced if you want to understand them. Here is the thing about simply memorizing stuff from books. You might run into an interviewer who asks you to code or think of a solution for a problem that requires practical experience. If you have never gotten your hands dirty, you might end up giving answers that don't work in the real world or are just plain wrong. It is all about having that practical experience to back up what you have learned. Tip number 9 is be pragmatic and goal-oriented with your learning. Focus on that by closely studying job specs and interview questions. Anything else is irrelevant or secondary and might even lead to trouble if you talk about it during an interview without actually understanding it. And speaking of interviews, I have 2 videos with 20 tips that will help you ace those pesky technical interviews. The final tip, and probably the most important, find a mentor. The best person to guide you is someone with years of experience in the industry. This is what I do with clients who reach out to me, confused about the field and where to start. A mentor can save you months or years of frustration, so don't skimp on your valuable time. Most of these tips come together in my first mini-series on this channel, Breaking into Cybersecurity, which I always recommend as a classic. And that is all, Spartans. In this video, I shed some light on polymathy and how you can speed up your cyber learning. Was this useful? Do you want me to cover something else? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, stay safe, stay paranoid.